I recently made a video about how I rebuilt my first ship ever in Space Engineers from all the way back in 2014. This is the video of how I built it, step by step. So this is the original. It's quite messy, of course, and it just looks like a noodle. So the first thing I did was to just clean it up, make it a nice blue blob. Then I made it a bit thicker. You can see the cockpit is 5 blocks instead of 3. And I separated it into 3 different parts. I just cut some gaps into it, and I also added this spine here on the back. I did add some wings because I thought the middle was a bit too thin, and I made them even thicker here. And I realized I need something on the back as well, so I added some more wings here. And at this point, the basic shape was already there. The next step, I changed the cockpit a bit. I just thought this cockpit is a bit big and blocky, so I wanted it to be a bit more thin, a bit flatter. And I started changing it a little bit. I continued that and made it this blocky cockpit here, which I ended up removing again and then reverting it more or less to the original. But for now, I changed it to this cockpit. And then in the next step, I already added the turrets, because I feel like turrets are such a big part of the design that you have to incorporate them quite early on. And in this case, I put them on these round pedestals here. General rule of thumb, I feel like turrets should always be placed so that if you look at them from the top and from the side, there's always something behind them. There's always a background. They never really stick out against, so they never really add to the silhouette of the ship. I also started adding some thrusters here at the back and on top. Continued that, of course, in the next version. Added some more thrusters, added some landing gears as well here. Just all of the big functional blocks that really matter for the design. Also started to give it an actual sort of color pattern. I just choose the original colors here. Of course, it's not going to be final, but it always helps to do this quite early so you can actually tell how it might end up looking in the end. Since I didn't really like this cockpit, or rather I wanted it to be more original, I changed it back to this 45-degree angle, and yeah, again, just added in more thrusters and also changed the landing gears to some custom ones because I really don't like these ones anymore. I always make custom ones now. I continued building on the cockpit, and I think it turned out quite nicely just using these 45-degree slopes. I don't think I've ever built a cockpit like that, but it works pretty well. It doesn't have any windows, of course. In the end, I ended up putting just some windows here in the flat part in the front. It's simply cut off at the bottom, but there are just a bunch of greeble blocks below it. The next version, I just hollowed it out. I always do that at some point just before I start working on the conveyors to give myself a little bit of space. And then in the next version, of course, I add in the conveyors, and I also started doing the interior. Just blocked out some space here for the cockpit, and in the main room I also added a bit of an upper floor there and a lower floor down here. And all the green blocks are basically conveyoring. Also just tore out just the conveyors so you can see them. It's pretty simple. This is how it actually looks, and then with the old conveyors so you can see it a bit better. It's mainly just for the turrets. They all have a welder underneath it to weld it up. There's no projector that projects them, but I feel like you don't really need that. Nowadays the turrets have quite a lot of HP, so just having a welder helps quite a bit, and eventually pretty much the welder just gets blown up and then the turret's also gone. I also added a reactor here because, of course, for all of the ion thrusters you need a reactor. I chose the new warfare reactor and kind of put it a bit exposed here. I think it looks cool though. It's a bit stupid that you can just shoot at it, but it looks cool, so why not? Yeah, one more thing, also the jump drive there. Just it's a big ship. It needs a jump drive, right? And in this version, I pretty much finished the interior. I added in lights everywhere. I feel like lights are like one of the most important parts for the interior, even more than coloring, I guess. And then just a bunch of small little details everywhere. But you can see, of course, there's a big change to the next version. And there are no blocks that are different, really. It's just the color. So it really makes a big difference to give it a proper color, proper texturing. It makes it just look way more realistic. And this is also the final version already. I just added some lights on it. And if you want to know how I do this coloring, basically I always start off with like the grounding color, usually the darkest one, this dark gray here. Just paint the whole ship dark gray. Then I painted everything that's kind of on top of it. So like all of these panels here, I painted them white. And for the cockpit, I just chose to make the top white and the bottom gray, simply because it looks pretty cool on the inside, having these blue lights here and the gray cockpit. It just looks pretty silly if it's white, right? That doesn't look very good. And yeah, it wasn't quite like rusty and battered enough, so I made all the white better texture, added in some orange highlights under the turrets and the ridge at the top, made it all rusty, and I added a lot of these small little panels with different textures. I think that's always a great way to give it a lot more detail. And then I still thought it was a bit boring, so I changed some of the white into more like this reddish beige here, just to kind of make it a little bit more interesting, right? And also made some of the blocks there rusty. And that's the final version already. It took me 7 days to build this, around 1 hour per day, so like, you know, roughly 7 hours. And that's the original from 2014 as a comparison. It looks quite a bit different now, right? But I think it looks a lot better.